All right. Hello. We are going to wait for a second for people to pop on. While we wait for people to pop on, going to give it just a second. In case you missed the last live 2 weeks ago with Memes for Jesus, that's actually up on YouTube. I'll post a link for that later. But we are doing lives specifically to have conversations with people you might know about, you might not know about, and just talk about the Christian culture, what that looks like, their story within, to Jesus, what that looks like, and what their impact is on Christianity and what they're doing within that. So this week we're going to be talking to Dave from ODG Apparel. He's going to come on. A lot of you guys have DM me and you don't have a clue who ODG Apparel is, but that's good because I want to introduce you to ODG Apparel today. If you don't know who they are, I don't know if you've ever seen an ad from Epic Christian Memes, because there's a lot of ads for them from Epic, but I want to introduce you to ODG Apparel because I think they're doing a really good job of getting that message out of Christianity in a unique way. They're on today, and then next Wednesday we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking to Lindsay Davis. Some of you guys might have heard about her. She used to go to Bethel Supernatural School of Ministry, and she doesn't anymore, and she has a lot of differences with them as far as theologically now, so she'll be on next week. So let me see here if I can add, I gotta find him. There we go. So we're going to bring him on here. We're going to wait for the response, but hey!
What up?
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Of course. This is a little fancier than I know how to use this whole live thing, but we're doing it. I think I did it one other time, so we're figuring it out.
Well,
you have to show me the ropes.
Well, here you go. This is all you need to know. You're on, and we're good. That's all you need to know.
There you go.
This is my place. I was trying to set up, before I started doing this, I was trying to set up a podcast, and my computer just said, no, we're not doing that. It completely broke. So this is my answer, but I think it's a better one because it's video, so people can see. So
there you go.
People like that a lot better. So thanks for coming on once
again. Of
course. We'll get into it in a minute with some of the questions I have for you. And one of the questions is kind of about ODG. But I was surprised at how many people were DMing me going, who's ODG Apparel? What is that? I thought for sure people would know at least the brand because of, Epic Christian Memes run an ad like every week for you guys, which is how I found about you.
Yeah.
But anyway, could you just give kind of a basic rundown for them, kind of about who you guys are?
Yeah. So my name is Dave. I started a company called ODG Apparel. ODG stands for Old Dead Guys or Old Dead Gangsters. The heart behind the whole brand is, what would it be like to create stuff that puts people in a position to have conversations about Jesus, right? And so I had this funny, dumb idea in college to make a shirt with Charles Spurgeon, a famous theologian and pastor, and just put the word gangster underneath it. Part of why we did that was because we would always refer to him as, man, he's such a gangster. He's so solid. He's so bold. He's so kind of would just be real about his faith. And so we would just jokingly refer to him that. And I thought, oh, man, that'd be so funny if we made a shirt. We ended up making one. And then I was blown away by how many conversations I would have with people in these random contexts where, like, wow, we just had a really solid conversation about Jesus because you asked me why some old guy on my shirt had, you called a gangster. And so I remember having these conversations like, is there something to this? And so that just kind of led me to going, man, what would it look like if? And so it just sort of happened kind of organically and naturally. I never, to be honest with you, I'm not a Christian apparel kind of guy. Like, that's just not my thing. And so it was not like I've always had this dream of starting a Christian apparel business. It just sort of happened because I saw that it was causing these cool conversations. Why not kind of lean into that?
Awesome. Okay, so I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more because that's one of the questions I have for you. But I wanted to give everybody at least an overview because I think they were going in blind a little bit. So
that's fine. That just means we need to market more. So it's more than just Epic Christian Memes. We got to just go to all the Christian meme accounts now.
All right. So the first thing, obviously, before you got into even reading Spurgeon or knowing who he was, there had to be a story before that about coming to Christ. So give us a little bit of the short version of your testimony there of how you got there.
Yeah, so I grew up in the church. I grew up really just like that was what we did. We went to church. My grandfather was a pastor, and we were constantly involved in churchy sort of things. Um, as I kind of grew up in the church, I was super involved in the church youth group, missions trips. I mean, everything that youth groups do and church kids do, and I did them all. And so, um, I thought I was a Christian. I grew up in this. I am a Christian, obviously. But went to college and then realized in college, oh, I am not a Christian, right? Because once I was I left that community and I went to a new community, I realized I just became like whatever community I was around. So if I was around church people, we talked about Jesus and that was normal. And then when I was at college, I just partied all the time, right? And so once that kind of door to like partying and the college lifestyle sort of opened for me, it was like gangbusters. It just like floodgates, right? And so I just kind of realized really quickly, wow, I don't know Jesus. Like I have no hope in any, like I don't even know how to like what I'm waking up for anymore. And so there was this really like dark time in college where I was a religion philosophy major at a non-Christian school. So every one of my teachers made fun of me for even thinking that believed in this stuff. And I wasn't even sure if I believed in it now at this point. And so now I'm like, what the heck? And so that's
what am I doing?
Yeah, exactly. That's what spurred me on to like party even more because I had this like identity issue of like, man, everything I knew, I thought I believed, I don't know if I believe anymore. And they're telling me I shouldn't. And it was during that time that I feel like God was working in the background of just sort of orchestrating all these events in my life to kind of like get me to this point where like things changed for me. And so during that time, I had a good friend of mine, Ryan, who was just pursuing me for the gospel, like constantly like, hey, let's hang out. I was the kid that literally I remember in college getting kicked out of a Bible study because I was like so just like intense and like, this is dumb. I don't think
They couldn't take it.
Yeah. And so then he was the kind of guy that was like, invite me to like Chili's after that. Like, hey, why are you a lunatic? Like, let's talk about your faith. Like, why do you believe this stuff? And anyway, so during that time, like he just kept pursuing me. And I remember at the tail end of my sophomore year, which was my worst semester. I mean, at this point we were partying 6-7 nights a week. It was just like anything I could do to not think about like all the darkness and sin. Like, I don't know anything. I was living this double life. And right at the end of that semester, he's like, hey, I'd love to meet with you. He was really involved with a college ministry called InterVarsity. And he was like, hey, I'd really love to meet with you. Why don't you come to my office? So I'm there. And he's like, hey, I want you to meet this person. She's in charge of this. And he was like, hey, I really want you to know we want you to be a leader next year for InterVarsity. And I just went, I was like, Ryan, you know the lifestyle I'm living. Like, I just like, you saw me last night. You had to pick me up from, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'm not following Jesus. And he said, but I think you're done with it. I think you're done. I think you're ready to start following Jesus. And it was like, I mean, literally in that moment, I was like, you're right. And I don't like to talk about it like there was this lightning flash. It wasn't like that. But what it was is for months, God had been prepping me through the kind of the dark season of it all. Mm-hmm. So that when he said that, I was like, you're right. I don't want that anymore. I want something new. And so I spent that whole summer sort of really asking the question to myself, am I going to believe this? Right? Like, okay, I thought I believed it before. If I'm going to do this, I'm really going to do it. Because all my friends in college were atheists. And so because of that, and they were kind of pushing me and questioning me about my faith. So because of that, I knew that if I was going to do this, I had to really do it. Because they would have said, hold on a second, why do you believe this? And so I really spent that whole summer diving into the Word, praying a lot, like really saying things to God like, if you're real, then like I need to go deeper in this. And so it was really that summer that was pivotal for me. And then I went back to college that next semester, like, okay, this is new. I'm going to be a different person. And kind of that was the start of me really, I would guess, coming to faith, right? Thinking I was saved before, but really realizing in that moment that that's when the Lord really came and woke me up.
Awesome. All right, so 2 follow-up questions to that I found interesting while you were talking. One, so you were studying religion and philosophy. Why did you choose to go to like a secular school instead of maybe a school that specifically focused on that sort of thing?
I honestly, I didn't go to school thinking, oh, I'm going to be a religion philosophy major. I just sort of showed up at school. I played tennis in college or in high school and everything, so I had a scholarship to go play tennis there. And so for me, it was like, I love religion. I love philosophy. I love kind of those deeper things, those deeper conversations. And so for me, it was like, I love this. Let's do it. And so I did that kind of just because I wasn't like, oh, gotcha. I'm going to do it. It just kind of happened. So it was actually something I credit a lot is being in those environments where it wasn't Christian professors, it wasn't Christian teachers. It really pushed me to go, man, do I believe this? Right? Do I believe that God is this way? Do I believe that God said that? And so it was a really powerful time of my life, really shaped me going forward, understanding why people doubt, understanding that it is hard to understand and believe this stuff. So.
Gotcha. So the second question, I think I already know the answer to this, but so, I mean, obviously you think that doing that, I mean, I think you just answered it probably, but going through all of that made a much firmer foundation for you later on.
Oh, for sure. It's so clear. Like, I say this to guys that I'm discipling all the time, like, don't disregard those kind of darker seasons of your life and of your faith, because God is working in the midst of, right? He says in Romans 8, right? I love how we kind of distort this passage, but Romans 8 says, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. All things, right? Like me partying in college.
Yeah.
All things work together for good. Not just the good things that I want to work together for good, but like the terrible, like those moments that I didn't want to get out of bed because I felt so depressed, I had nothing. Right? The way I describe it is like that season of my life, I refer to it as like that. And I know people who are listening who have been in that world have felt this, that 3 a.m. moment where the party's over, everyone's left, and you're sitting there with nothing, feeling like, I was this close to being happy. It was just right at the end of my fingertips, and I missed it. And then you realize, I'm never going to catch up. I'm never going to catch it, right? Like, I'm always going to feel just empty at the last minute. And so it was that moment that was like, I miss those moments sometimes, because there's those moments that you truly desire. I need something I need something else. Sometimes you get comfortable, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, no, I like that because as far as that story there, because there's a lot. I went to a Christian college, so there was a lot of people that didn't have those moments until after they got out of college, even, because I mean they went from church to Christian college and then to the real world, and then it just exploded. And they were, I mean, there's people that aren't even in the faith anymore that I'm friends with, that their whole world blew up at like 25 because I mean, it took that long. So
yeah, it's true.
There's definitely like like you said, like this just wonderful story to that. So awesome. So the second question here, and you've told a little bit about it already, but you said you never went into making a Christian clothing brand. And I don't even know if you define yourself as that. You probably, I mean, you fit that category.
I don't know.
But
yeah, I guess
who knows
I
where
fit
you're
into
at.
that category. I don't know what I'm doing. No, I Christian apparel, Christian stuff, I usually say.
There you go. What made you, other than so obviously there was the Spurgeon Gangster t-shirt, which is awesome. But from that launching point, what made you go from, well, I just designed this really cool shirt one time that people like, to saying, okay, let's do a whole brand on this? What kind of drove you that way?
So I right out of college, I did mission work overseas. I lived in the Philippines for a few months and thought for sure, that's it. Like, I'm going overseas. I'm going to live overseas forever. Like, send me anywhere, Lord. Like, I was so intense about it. And it was in those moments overseas where the Lord really called me through a lot of different situations. My family had some businesses in the States that were struggling and that they needed help with. And so they were really, the Lord being like, no, this is your mission field. Like, I'm calling you into business, and being like, God, why? I don't, like, here I am, like, send me, like, I'm ready. And he's like, I'm sending you to Bradenton, Florida, you know, and to like work in a business. And so I did a lot of business stuff right out of the Philippines. In the first few years, I hated every second of it. And I would almost feel like, all right, fine, God, I got to go to work. I got to do this. Like, as if it was like less holy than what I was doing. And it was during those seasons the Lord taught me just what it means to be obedient to him, that it's not about somewhere or something that he's calling. It's just about today, like being in his presence in the midst of. And so I really fell in love with what it looks like. And you and I, when we were on my podcast, we talked about this. Like, I love the idea of being a Christian in normal ways. Yeah. Right. I love the idea of being like, how do you follow Jesus at work? And so that was something that really, and the reason I love that is because it was so hard for me to get it. It was so hard for me to understand, what does this mean? Because I went from the Philippines where it was like, everyone knew I was there. And so it was easy to say, hey, let me tell you about my faith. You know, I'm the white Christian guy that flew across the country to be here. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it was harder at work. And so I fell in love with it. And so for me, when I had the idea for the t-shirt company, business has just been, since then, my obsession. I love figuring out ways. ODG is one of a few businesses that I own and run on a daily basis, because I love using that gift that God's given me to like figure out how a lot of the, like, the John Calvins of the world and the older theologians talk a lot about the idea of like just our civil duty of what it looks like to be in the culture around us and doing and creating good things, and how that brings glory to Jesus and shows the world his creative power and all that stuff. And so I really just fell in love with that.
Gotcha. That's one of the things I like about, I mean, if you look through, and I would encourage everybody watching to go to their site, but what I like is it's not that, and I'm sure you've seen these t-shirts. When I was in youth group coming up, there was all these t-shirts that had secular logos that had been twisted horribly and stupidly into some Christian t-shirt. The Tide one I saw all the time. It was, I forget what it even said, but I know it was pretty horrible. It was Tide and it had been transformed. So I appreciate that a lot of your guys' stuff isn't just for the Christian culture as much as it is to start that conversation with people outside. I mean, that's the really cool thing I think about your guys' stuff.
And it's funny because we get a lot of flack online, as I'm sure you do, with memes and stuff like that, where people
never.
Yeah, people just have way too much time on their hands. I'm always like frustrated. Sorry, I'm trying to like figure out how to like hold my phone up and charge it at the same time, because God forbid I charged it before this. So I am trying to. I get a lot of comments from people in frustration where they're like, "Hey, why don't you put scripture verses on your shirt? Why don't you put Jesus on your shirt?" Because that's something I've just made kind of a claim for the most part, that we're going to be really intentional to not make it a shirt where someone could walk by and go, "Oh, I get that. I know what that means," and just walk away. The whole point is I want to encourage conversation. I don't want the line I always use with people when they give me a hard time is, I don't want my clothes to be bold for me. I want to be bold, right? I want to preach the gospel. I don't need my clothes to preach the gospel. I need my clothes to maybe start a conversation or to help me. Like, you have to wear a t-shirt, right? Well, why not wear a t-shirt? Like, none of us are walking around without shirts, and if we are, there's probably something not right. But if we're going to wear clothes, if we're going to wear hats, if we're going to wear t-shirts out in public, why not wear something that could strike up a conversation? But I don't want it to have all the information on there. I don't want just the book of Ephesians on my shirt.
Yeah.
But if I can get someone who's not expecting it to have a conversation with me about the gospel, let's go for it. I'm in. You know what I mean? Like, that's so different than, and whenever people, a line we use a lot is like, Christian stuff is usually cheesy. We decided to change that. And people get so up in arms about that, like, why are you calling them out? I'm like, listen, we all know it's cheesy, right? The Reese's peanut butter cup shirt that says Jesus is whatever, like, we all know that that's cheesy. Like, I don't know who, if you don't, then you're a grandma. But like, most people are like, yeah, that's cheesy. And so, none, I always think about my atheist friends in college, the ones that God just kind of put in my way, that would just look at me. I don't mean to take up a whole long, but one of my favorite a conversation that changed my life was an atheist friend of mine. I just started following Jesus about 6 months prior to that. We're out at a meteor shower. He's a new kid at school, so he doesn't remember. He never saw me back in the party days.
Gotcha. He
only saw me here, and he goes, "What's up with you?" Like, we're at a party at this point, and we're out at a beach, and there's a big meteor shower, and he goes, "So what's up with you? Like, I hear you used to party, and now you're not. Like, you're like some religious guy." I'm like, "Well, I'm started following Jesus," and I start to walk him through that. And he's an atheist. He's from Europe, and he just says to me, he's like, "Oh, okay," and I could just tell that he's got this like thing in his head that he wants to say. I could just kind of, the silence of the moment just feels heavy. And so I'm like, "What's up, dude? Like, what are you thinking? What's going on?" And he's like, I mean, this is like an hour-long conversation, but he just says, "I don't know, maybe you're right, Dave. Maybe your God exists, and maybe I just can't wrap my head around it." He says, "But man, I got to believe that if I could, I would care a whole lot more than you do." He's like, I don't think you believe it. And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Think about it. If what you're saying is true, if this God can change forever for people, eternity, and like eternity is on the line here, I would probably drop out of the school if I believed this, and I'd move to the furthest country on the furthest planet, and I'd make sure they heard it. You know what I mean? Like, come hell or high water, come torture, whatever, they need to hear this." He's like, "You don't really care." He's like, "You watch the same movies I watch, you listen to the same music I listen to." He's like, it's not that important to you. And so he's like, "I don't believe it because I don't think you believe it." And it was like, in that moment, I remember saying to myself, I never want to live a life that people look at me and go, "I don't think you believe this." I want them to look at me and go, "You're insane. This isn't true. But man, you believe this.
You're in it." Yeah.
Yeah. And so back to the shirts, like, I don't want to create stuff that my atheist friends would go, "That's cute." You know what I mean? I want to create stuff that really believes what I say I believe, right? That this is really that important. You know what I mean?
Amen.
So,
well, and I think that's the thing, again, I mean, I appreciate about your guys' line is that it's not something that you can look at. It's not, so whereas the old church, the corny ones that I grew up with, and apparently you grew up with too, really preach to the choir, your stuff really brings it into the conversation. So, I mean, that Reese's shirt, I highly doubt, outside of the great work of the Holy Spirit, ever started a conversation with somebody.
Yes.
Whereas,
and if it did, it was a negative one.
Yeah. Because of how corny it was.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's the thing, not just with your shirts, but I think you touched on a really important point that I have in DM conversations all the time. You can see it in the comments of the memes a lot, where people are so, I think, two things. One, we as a church are fairly biblically illiterate in a lot of ways. And two, when people start actually looking into it, they're sometimes way too scared to even, stand behind it because they're like, well, I can't defend it. Whereas really, like you said, it's one of those things where I think a lot of people, I mean, I said this on the last thing that I did 2 weeks ago, where I live, there's a church in every corner. So people have always heard about it. People have always seen your life. So what does take that change, that conversation to happen, is somebody that says, that dramatic life living differently. Because a lot of people that go to church don't live hardly any differently than anybody outside, or they conform just a little bit and then they'll accept the other, So, I mean, your atheist friends
and my atheist friends would look at them and go, "You don't believe this, right?"
Exactly.
An illustration that I kind of created out of those moments is like, man, if I believed that they were going to someone was going to put poisonous gas in a building in a local area in my town, and I walked in and said, "Hey, just FYI, everybody, later today there's going to be poisonous gas. Like, you probably should get out." They would go, "You're nuts," and get out. If I come running in with a gas mask on, weeping, dragging people out of the building, they're like, "Listen, that might not be true, but you definitely believe. There's no question that you believe this because you're showing it. You live it." And so for me, I always want to, through prayer, the Spirit, through the Word, I want to be in a place where I believe it like it's true. Because this is either true or it isn't. We're either insane for having an Instagram Live about something that doesn't even exist, or what the heck are we doing? We've got to tell everybody about this.
Yeah. Well, and I think, some people might see it as negative, but I think a lot of the way our culture is shifting anyway is going to force that conversation, regardless of if the church wants to face it or not. The conversation is quickly flipping to where you're going to have to pick it. You're going to have to pick. You're either going to have to sound crazy, or you're just going to go, well, it's not worth it to me enough. So, I mean, I want to call it a grace, but I don't want to call it, it's going to be one of those things where it's really going to be the grace of God that says, okay, well, this is the line. Where do you stand on that line? You follow me or not? So, awesome.
Yeah. And there's an early church father that said, the blood of martyrs is the seed of the church. You know what I mean? Like, the idea of it was in the midst of the suffering and the persecution of the early church that the church grew out of that, right? Like, people saw that and said, wow, they believe that.
Yeah. The first time I ever even thought about that, we're spending a lot of time on this, but that's awesome. The first time I ever thought about that, I had a professor. It was in one of my early theological classes, and he made us write a 7-page paper on, is persecution good or bad? And it's the first time I really had to think about the fact that really the church grows a lot more and a lot deeper during those times where you're forced to decide that. Growing up in a church all my life and then going to, I had never even considered that as was that good or bad? But awesome. So next question I got for you. So this comes from the fact that out of this meme page, there are things that I never expected to happen. This conversation being one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
That came from the start of something that I thought was me just venting. So out of you starting ODG, what are some things that have come out of it that you would have never even expected?
Stuff like this that I never, but honestly for me, what I really look forward to is using this platform to do things like this, right? Like, this, for some people, is not their MO. Like, some people could not jump on a live and just chat about, that's just something I'm good at. I enjoy. Like, you ask me to build you a table, it'll never happen. You ask me to, like, I'm just not good at a lot of things, but things that I'm good at are like, I feel comfortable here. I feel good here. And so, like, I love teaching at our church. I'm an elder at my church, so I love teaching at my church. I love writing blogs, content. Like, that's something I enjoy doing for my business, because I'm like, man, people need to hear this. And so that's the stuff that I'm probably the most excited by, is the platform that people are like my podcast that's grown pretty consistently, and a lot of downloads, all that other stuff, and feeling like, wow, people really want to listen to this. That's something that I'm like, dang, this is really cool to me, that I get to have these conversations. I've never tried to sell anything on the podcast. Like, I don't have any intention. Like, that's not the point of it. The point of it is, hey, you want to listen? You think we're cool? Cool. Like, now we're going to tell you about Jesus.
Yeah. Good deal. I love that too. When I first listened to, like, the intro is, why does the apparel company have a podcast? Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Good deal. What is, just plug that real quick, what is your podcast? How can people find that?
It's just look up ODG Apparel Podcast. It's basically anywhere that you get a podcast, you can find it. And so the goal there is to just constantly have, and I think some people get thrown off by it, but my guests are like, what are we going to talk about? I'm like, literally, you and I are going to jump on the phone and we're going to talk about, hey, what is it like following Jesus? And we're just going to have a conversation. Some people are not game for that. They're like, okay, like, what questions? I'm like, we're just going to talk as two people who follow Jesus. And so I'm going to ask you questions that you shouldn't have to study for, right? Like, it should just be like, okay, like, yeah. And so that's something that we just have a conversation. And so a lot of questions like, what does following Jesus look like for you during your daily life, right? Like, what does reading the Bible look like? Those kinds of things. So I enjoy it. Yeah, ODG Apparel Podcast, anywhere you find podcasts.
All right. I knew that answer, but I wanted to give everybody else an opportunity.
No, of course. I'm going to try to charge this thing again, because
it's going out.
I don't want to just die on you.
So I got one last question, and then we have a few follower submitted questions here, but I want to ask, one of the purposes of doing these sort of video live things is to, again, conversation.
Yeah.
So the one question I want to ask everybody that ever comes on here is, what do you think the biggest issue or challenge facing Christianity is today?
The biggest challenge or issue facing Christianity today?
Because there's a lot.
I don't know if I'm really thinking about what it is as much as I'm thinking about how to phrase and communicate. You and I have talked about this on my podcast, off air, different times. I think what burdens me the most is how okay people are with living in that gray area of, right? Like, what we are saying is so insane. Like, when we talk about a God who created people, who then will send some of them to hell for all of eternity. If we're not right, we should be persecuted. Right? If we're not right, send us in jail. We're like literally destroying society if it's not true. Right? And so people kind of live in this like, yeah, it's cool. I'm a Christian. You're not a Christian. That's cool. Like, we just believe different things. As a Christian, like, I think part of what burdens me the most about the church locally is when you go to these, and we have churches like this in our area, and I'm very outspoken about them, that are just like, it's like 10 steps to a better life. My atheist friends would go, see, you don't believe this. You just want a better life. Because if you believed it, you'd really live it. And so I think for me, the burden is, man, is this true? It's something I'm saying at every one of my Bible studies, every time I'm meeting with guys that I'm discipling. It's black and white. This is either so true that what are you thinking about anything else for? Or this is so ridiculous that why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah.
And so we have to, I want to be a part of a church community, a big C church community, that's like asking questions like that, right? That's asking, why do I wake up at the time that I wake up at? Why do I dress the way that I dress? Why do I eat the things that I eat? I want every second and inch of my life to be called into question, because this is so amazing. Or it's dumb and we shouldn't even talk about it. But we can't live in that middle.
Yeah.
We can't live in that middle of like I live like the rest of the world, but I'm a Christian. That's so, and the problem is we have so many pastors just placating to that and being okay with that, because it's just like, I don't know, it's just so whatever. It's so bleh. It's so, that's my biggest burden and frustration is pastors who are okay with making a business out of the church You know, you see it, it's made fun of a lot on Instagram, preachers and sneakers and that kind of thing. Man, that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Like, it literally crushes me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think about a perfect example, right? And this is something my wife and I have talked a lot about, is there's a lot of like people up in arms on Twitter about different things in the church all the time. Pastors constantly going back. There's been a thing with Beth Moore and Albert Mohler and all kinds of stuff in the SBC and different things. People talking about women in ministry, all that stuff. Important conversations, all of them. But man, then you see the flip side of that coin, which is someone like David Platt, who's literally posting on his Twitter once a month, and one of the videos is him in a cave in China where they send Bibles to North Korea. I'm like, that's Christianity. I don't need you arguing about theology on Twitter, Pastor. Like, I need you, like, in the prayer closet. You know what I mean? And so there's the David Platt example, and then there's also the Paul Washer, is a favorite pastor of mine, where he literally tweeted out the other day, "Pray for my dear brother who was just arrested in China." I'm like, that's Christianity. My atheist friends look at that and go, you believe that, right? But then there's these pastors on the other side that just want to be famous, right? They're like cool hair and they're, I don't know. It's just, that's the stuff that messes me up and frustrates me and stuff.
Yeah. Well, because, I mean, like what you're saying, I mean, it sends such an opposite message to everyone. I mean, and again, I mean, to play on that, the Preachers and Thinkers is a perfect example. I mean, that thing exploded with people from both sides basically, I mean, saying the same thing, like, well, okay, obviously, I mean, look at how much money this is. I mean, and it started a really good conversation. But, I mean, I think even in the church, what you just said is really interesting, because I was invited to preach I think it was the sermon before Christmas at a church. I don't know if it's up on my YouTube or not, but basically what I introed with was, you guys understand that we're insane for saying that this baby that came down was God. Like, you understand. And like, you could tell the interesting thing from, I mean, and you said you're an elder, so I'm sure you've seen this before when you preach, that just the blank stare, that you're just like, no, you don't understand what I just said. What I just said is, you're insane if you believe this. And it's just, you can see where the dots don't connect sometimes with the idea that, you know, what you believe literally sounds insane to everyone else outside of this area or this building, and probably to some of you in this building it sounds crazy.
And we just get too comfortable with it. We're like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, he came down in a baby. That makes sense.
Yeah, we just shake our yeah. Well, and it's God's grace that opens our eyes to the fact that there's so much more to it than that. Of us just being like, yeah, okay, we'll go along with it until something comes in and, you know, disrupts our belief. And then we have to make a choice. So,
or people say this all the time. They say, "Well, if it's not true, no big deal, right? Right? If it's not true, I live for Jesus. I just won't go to hell. So if it's not true, then I win. It's a win-win for me, right?"
I don't know if I've ever heard that, but that's super concerning.
Like people, no, I've had people say that to me, like, "Oh, well, I believe in Jesus, but if it's not true, then I'm good. Like, it's a win-win, right?" Instead of like, no, if this isn't true, Paul says his life was a waste. Right? Like, we want to so give everything up for Jesus that if this isn't true, we're like, my life was a waste. I gave everything up for this Jesus guy.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, if you're watching or watching later after this, I mean, that's my plea to you would be, is if you go to church and you hear a sermon that doesn't have anything to do with giving your life for the gospel, and they don't mention Jesus once, which has sadly happened when I've went to a few churches, run away and find somebody that does. Yeah. Because that's not a church. That's a inspirational group. Is that what you call that?
That's Motivational Monday.
Yeah. Motivational Monday. All right. So we're going to get into a couple of the questions here that people have sent in. My phone is shaking like crazy. Let's start with one. Let me see here. Let's start with this one. So, what if you don't know what God wants you to do, I'm assuming with your life? How would you answer that question? Somebody comes up and says, hey, I don't know what God wants me to do with my life. What would you say?
So, I am so excited that this is a question, because I am reading a book right now. And whoever asked that question, please, 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 everyone on this, whatever this is, live, Instagram, go look up the book In His Image by Jen Wilkin. I just started reading it today, and the book opens with, the point of this book is that you would never ask the question, what is God's will for my life? The point of this book is that when you're done with it, you would never ask that question ever again. What is God's will for my life? God's will is very clear. Be holy as I am holy. You know what I mean? Like, that is it. Like, the where questions of where does God want me, what job does he want me in, are so less important, right? Very important to God, but we are consumed with them like, yeah, I got it. I got to be holy. I get that. but really, what does God want for my life? And one of the illustrations she uses is, listen, there are people in abject poverty in the world that don't get to ask that question. For someone just asked, the author is Jen Wilkin. She's with the Village Church. But people don't get to ask that question. If they're in abject poverty in the Middle East or in the Philippines where I was, they don't ask, what does God want with my life? This is all I have the opportunity for, right? We being, wealthy in America get to say, what does God want with my life? I could do anything. I'm God. No, like, seek Jesus and be obedient and trust that in the midst of those decision making, we can use our brain and we can say, God, I think this is what you're leading me to, and to kind of walk with open hands rather than constantly looking for this divine, I won't do anything until God says, right? Rather than just like, no, go be obedient. So pursue, seek first the kingdom of God and these things will be added to you. Like, just seek Jesus rather than seeking what does Jesus want with my life, because really he's just a means to an end. He just helps me get something, right, which is a good life, rather than just like, hey, just get Jesus, wherever that is, right? If I have to be a janitor at the local high school, or I have to stock shelves at Walmart, or I have to be a CEO and make $100 million, I don't care. I just want Jesus. So I would encourage them, just seek Jesus, not something from him.
Amen. And I think a lot of that, and I think we had this conversation either off air or on that podcast, but it was about, just in your everyday life, people so downplay that. Like, well, I mean, for your janitor, your Walmart example, like people are going, well, like, I can't do great things for God because I sweep floors, or I can't do great things for God because I stock shelves. And like my story in general, I mean, I worked for Walmart for years ago. And like the most amazing conversations, I unloaded trucks for them right when I got out of college. And one of the greatest conversations I've ever had was talking about religion and Jesus with people as these boxes were coming down the line. And it was a real light bulb moment that goes, I just got out of college for ministry, so I was doing that part-time, but I was here, and I was having deeper ministry conversations with this dude across this assembly line from me than I was at this church. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is so much, deeper. And like you said, so, I mean, he might want you there right now, and that's where he's trying to use you.
Well,
so.
And even like a step further with that, like, even if no conversations happen, like God, something that someone said to me once is, God created galaxies that no human eye will ever see except for God, and it pleases him. Right? Like, it didn't need to do anything. It just pleased him by being.
Yeah.
Right? He created and said, that's good. I enjoy that. And so us just existing and becoming the thing that he's called us to, God, she says in the book, God is so much more concerned with who you're becoming than where you're going or what you're doing. And so it's like, man, God is making us into the image of Christ. That pleases him, right?
Yeah.
Just seek that, right? And if you don't have a conversation with anyone ever again, okay. If you have 100 conversations a day, okay. Like, our goal is the seeking of Jesus.
Excellent point there, Thea. Yeah, that's an excellent point too, because there's going to be places where that doesn't happen. So that's a good realization.
Yeah.
Next question. This is a huge question, so I don't know if we can fit this in, but how do you know that God is real? I mean, that's enormous question.
Okay, so I will answer it quickly. As someone who, for a season of his life, said, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in this God. I believe in what these atheist friends of mine and my professors are saying. And then a shift happened. So I had to answer that question. And so first way I answer the question of, is God real, and how can I prove God, and even talking to atheists, is I don't start with that problem. Don't start with a problem of proving God. It's an impossible task. There are philosophers and people who believe it's not impossible, and I would say they're smarter than me, and they're probably right. Think about people like Ravi Zacharias, who can really work through those questions well. But I start with the cross. For me, what was really the game changer was, if Jesus is who he says he is, if Jesus came back from the dead, that automatically answers the question of God. No man is coming back from the dead without there being a supernatural being. That just doesn't happen. And so for me, it's the cross. So everything about me believing in God comes down to the fundamental truth of, did Christ come back from the dead? Because if he came back from the dead, he is who he says he is. And if he is who he says he is, then God is who he says he is. And there's just kind of this logic that follows.
It just follows through, yeah.
It just has to, right? So for me, as an atheist, as someone not believing in this, the game changer for me, and I think for a lot of people when I have this conversation and really strikes them, is the 12 disciples. I cannot think of a reason why 12 men die horrible, tragic deaths, right, for something that wasn't true, right? We're not talking, they didn't have faith in Jesus dying, coming back from the dead. They saw it happen, right? People say, yeah, but people die for their religion or their faith all the time. Muslims, everybody, like every religion, people die for their faith. No, these guys died for something they saw, right? The first couple guys that they want to murder, they're like, hey, we saw Jesus come back from the dead. And they're like, no, you didn't. And they're like, he's not in the tomb. And they're like, well, you took him. And they're like, we didn't take him. They're like, well, we're going to kill you. And they're like, okay, I don't know why, but I'm just telling you what I saw. And they're like, well, they kill the first guy. They torture him. They kill him. They just, murder him. Some of these people they're dragging behind carts, right? And so the first guy, if they're lying, that second and third guy's like, guys, listen, we got carried away with
not worth it.
The body's right there. Yeah. Like, I don't know what we were thinking.
They were serious. That was a big flex.
Exactly.
I mean, you got it.
Yeah. And so the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth guy dies for this, saying, tears in his eyes. I don't know what to tell you, Romans. Like, I saw him. Like, he was alive. I'm not telling you I think he was alive or I want him to be alive. I don't even know why he's alive. I don't know what's going on. I just know I saw him. He was dead and now he's not. And so you think about that 12th guy, right? Some people say, oh, well, they just wanted it to be true so bad they made it true. They hallucinated it into being true. It's like, man, that 12th guy, he doesn't die unless he's, guys, tears in his eyes. They're about to hang him upside down, whatever it may be, Peter, church history. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's true. I saw it. And so for me, it's what logical reason do 12 men die for something that they could have easily said, nope, it's not true. Not faith. It wasn't belief. They didn't really even understand why or what was going on. They just like, this happened. I think it's actually more supernatural to believe that he didn't come back from the dead. Like, I think you have a harder time proving that than you do saying, okay, then it just the simplest thing is true. He came back from the dead. And you look at the greatest religions in the world, you look at Islam, they have 1.8 billion people in the world and a lot of very smart scholars, and they have a hard time explaining why 12 men died, right? They have to come up with extremely complex stories and scenarios. Some even say, oh, well, what happened was, bread in that day, the yeast could make them hallucinate, and they hallucinated, and they all thought they saw something. I'm like, that's fine, but that 12th guy doesn't die for hallucination.
That's a super long hallucinate. I mean, that lasted a long time.
Exactly. So for me, that was the kicker. That was the thing that really changed me. Going, okay, if that's true, and that's all without the Bible. We have that in history books. We have that in Roman, literature. You burn all the Bibles, we still have that truth that 12 men, and early church people are dying for this truth that they saw. I don't believe that unless there is a God. So that's the logic for me.
Gotcha.
Big question.
Yeah, that's a huge question. But I mean, it speaks to the transformation power of the cross right there. I mean, when it happened, I mean, there's not a whole lot of explanation. It's just, I know this is accurate. Let's see here. A few more have come in actually since we started this. So this is not as big of a question here for you, but what is your favorite Bible verse and why?
Favorite Bible verse is Romans 9:16. Not by human will, not by exertion, but by God's mercy. Like that idea that even in the Greek, the idea of exertion or human will, like this idea of like running, not even by running towards God am I saved, but by his mercy, by him saying, I'm saving you. Like the idea that the power isn't on my shoulders, the power is on his. And so that just to me is like that promise that I just constantly am reminding myself of, like when I feel far from God or I feel whatever the enemy wants me to feel, that I can remind myself, it's not by my will. It's not by how hard I try. It's not by how bad I want it. It's by Christ and him saying, I love you. I'm pursuing you. I'm coming for you. Right? It's him saying, I could give you death, but I'm not going to. I decided. That idea of like, man, I'm completely helpless and he's completely hopeful. So that's my favorite verse.
Awesome. That's amazing. All right, so here's more of a serious question. This came up in the last one, and I think it's going to come up in every probably video up until the end of time that we do now. But what is the most important part of the whole LGBTQ debate? And as Christians, how do you think we should approach it? Yeah, right?
So I just had a conversation with someone this morning about that. Two guys that I'm discipling. We just literally had the same conversation. And part of it is there's someone in their life that is homosexual, and they're like, man, they really need Jesus, but I don't know how to have this conversation with them. I don't even know how to broach it. There's so much in the church world that just is not good. And how do we, like, man, just tell them about Jesus. All I can tell you, like, the thing that we have to be reminded of is that there are two kinds of people in the world, people who are dead in sin and people who are alive in Christ. That's it, right? Like, if we believe that homosexuality is not the way that God intended it to be, right? He also didn't intend for us to be addicted to pornography. He also didn't intend for us to be liars. He also didn't intend there's a lot of sins that God didn't intend for us to be.
Yeah.
Go tell people about Jesus. If he is who he says he is, right? Like, if he is who he says he is, he'll take care of everything, right? So part of it is, we just get so wrapped up in like, well, we make sure people have all the answers first. No, they don't. Like, just tell them about Jesus and trust the God of the universe who created light. God created light without seeing it beforehand. It's not like he saw it on vacation and was like, this would be good on earth. Like, he just said, boom. You know what I mean? Like, I'm creating this thing. That God can do whatever he wants. Nothing holds him back. And so that might feel like a hurdle, but it's no more a hurdle than someone being a liar. And I say hurdle because I believe that God intends for it to be the way that it was with Adam and Eve. I think he intends for it to be a man and a woman. That's how he built us, right? A car is built to run a certain way, right? So, but rather than being people who are like, well, like, I think even with this conversation, it's easy to get into a debate of, well, I think God is okay with homosexuality. I think God is not okay with homosexuality.
That's a big debate in itself, yeah.
Right. That's a big debate in itself, and I'm sure that the person asking that question, there's people who come from it from different perspectives. I would say the big thing is, before we even get into that conversation, what I want people to have in their own heart and in their bones is, I don't care what the Bible says. I just want to know. Not, I really hope it says this.
Yeah.
Right? For both sides of the coin, right? Like, I really hope it says that homosexuality is a sin. Or I really hope it says that it's not a sin. How about we just say, I just want Jesus. That's all I want. I just want him because he's true. And so because of that, if we get to a text where it says, my name's David, right? If I get to a text and it's like, the name David is dumb, you shouldn't have it. I'm like, all right, well, changing my name.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go, no, what it really is saying is.
Yeah.
Right? That's the heart that kills me about this conversation, is so many times people come at it from these weird angles rather than just saying, I don't care. Whatever it says, I just want to know.
Yeah.
Whatever Jesus is like, we're all going to stand before Jesus and he's going to explain to us and we're all going to go, oh, that makes sense. We were wrong about that.
We were totally messed up about that one.
But it's actually true a certain way, right? Our culture believes that truth is like kind of relative to the person, but truth is reality. He's going to explain truth to us and go, this is what's true. And we're all going to go, oh, okay, I didn't realize. We got to make sure that we're getting there today going, I just want to know what's actually true, because there's a right way about doing this. And so I just encourage everyone listening, have the heart that says, man, God is who he says he is. And I just want to know I'm seeking that out. I'm seeking out who he is, rather than I kind of am hoping I see this.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of a big part of that conversation in my mind.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you pointed out, I mean, it's not just that, it's how you approach every sin. I mean, it's one of those things, and not only that, and that was the conversation I was having the other day, what you followed that up with was how do you approach the Bible? So do I open it up and I say, I'm going to find my point of view here and then do from that? Or do I say, I'm going to be under the supremacy of Scripture and what God has said, and then my view based on that is going to change by the Holy Spirit working through me in sanctification? Because a lot of that, I mean, when I was the views I had in college, growing up in a Christian home and going to church all the time, were one way. And then because of just the denomination I had grown up in, how I've been taught, and then I started going through the Bible and just reading it, and some of those views drastically changed to the point to where there's some people, I mean, that the denomination I used to be a part of, that's like, yeah, we totally disagree with you. Don't ever preach that if you come here. And I mean, and it's just one of those things where I'm like, well, this is just what it said. I'm just telling you. I mean, I just read it through. And I think we really have to, I mean, like you said, it's very important to come with, how do you come at the text? Looking for you to tell it something, or do you come at the Bible for it to teach you?
And again, back to my atheist friends, they would say, listen, if you believe this, then it is what it is, right? Like, my atheist friends always used to point out to me, man, if you believe this, you got to deal with the fact that the Old Testament God is intense. Like, don't just try to apologize for him. You're not God. If he's real, you got to deal with that God. You don't go, man, I really wish God wasn't like that, right? He's God. He's better than you, right? And so they would even point that out to me like, man, if this is true, you got to deal with all of this, because I wanted to deal with just part of it.
Yeah. A conversation that can't be had here, but I hope to have later sometime, is just how the law and the gospel work together and are so separated that it's so preached far too often, just how it's this cohesive thing. So, all right. So let us look, we're about at an hour. So let's look at one more question and then we'll close this out here. There was one question that I can't find, but we'll go ahead. I wrote it down beforehand because I wanted to definitely cover it. So how do Christians, in your opinion, I mean, I know you've covered this a lot, but maybe delve a little bit deeper into it. How do we as Christians talk about our faith without coming off super pushy about it? Because I think a lot of people have had that interaction with people before where it's very much, here's the Bible, let me smack you with it, instead of here's the Bible, let me explain some stuff. So
yeah. I think my wife has been huge. So my wife is an area director for a ministry called Young Life. And so I've been a Young Life leader here for a few years now, and they do it really well, right? And one of the things that she's showed me in this community of Young Life people showed me is like the idea of showing up for people, right? Like living the life out that really allows those conversations to happen, right? If you're not investing in the world, right? If you're not creating businesses where the people of the world who don't follow Jesus are showing up, right? If you're just living at church and going to youth group, like you're never, who cares? What conversations are going to come up, right? And so living in the world and then being mindful and prayerful about like, where are you sending me, right? And so like a guy I was meeting with this morning, he works at Starbucks. All right, cool. Like pray before you walk into your shift, right? Pray for your employees by name every day when you're not working, right? Like think about them. Remember that God is sending you there. And I said, and that might mean you don't have a conversation for 2 months, right? But just being someone who lives in the world well, right? Who cares for people around them well, who does things that the world goes, oh, it's so weird. Not, well, I'm going to be bold by speaking, right? If you look at the early church, they weren't like these revolutionaries picketing on the streets and fighting for, they were quiet, secret people who lived quiet lives. But man, there was something about them that was different. And so what I would encourage people to do is, man, live a life that that people go, wow, that is different, right? Now, I'm not saying don't preach the gospel, right? Please do preach the gospel. I hate when people say, oh, if you have to use words, preach the gospel. If you have to use words, use words. No, it's like use words, but let that be coming on the heels of the fact that you've lived a life where people are like, man, you are a respectable person. You are someone who shows up on time. Like you are someone who cares about people, right? Like you are someone who goes above and beyond, who thinks about, right? Like there's just something about you where you show up for people, right?
Yeah.
And so part of that looks like you showing up for people who don't deserve it. It looks like you showing up and taking the L. Like Christians need to be okay with losing. So often we're fighting for our win and our what we get out of it, and rather than just like take the loss, right? Like I think about Young Life leaders all the time are like, you'll have a kid text you at 10 o'clock like, hey, can you pick me up and drive me here? Like, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like take that loss. Don't say to them, well, that's not, that was not, don't worry about how the world is. Just serve them. Serve the world in a way, right? Like I was just reading Jeremiah where he talks about being exiles, right? And he says, hey, do well for the city that you've been sent to. Like be exiles that plant trees and build houses and care for the place that you are. And so do that as a Christian, care for the people around you rather than thinking, how can I preach the gospel to them? Live that Christian life, live that Christ likeness out. And you'll be amazed at how many Christian conversations come up through that, right? And be looking for them. Don't just hope they come up, but look for them. Be bold in your faith, but let that be coming on the heels of a life that really goes, wow, that's the life that's different, right?
Yeah.
So I know that's a cliche and people hear it, but there's something about just, and part of that is be a stayer, not a goer. A lot of Christians are constantly like, what does God want from me? I'm going to go here. I'm going to do this fancy, crazy, bold thing. Like there's something to be said about sticking where you are for a long time so that can grow
legacy,
in the area. Yeah. Like people are like, I've known you for years and you've constantly been a man of your word. You know what I mean? Like there's something about that allows the gospel conversation to happen. I know gospel conversations that I've had that were 30-second conversations, but it was years of a life that made that 30-second conversation where I literally, this is a true story, had someone bawling in my office one day at one of my businesses. And this is a person who's a devout, like, I'm an atheist, don't invite me to church. Like we tried to, and they were like, no. And I just bawling, I said, listen, all I have for you is that Jesus is enough. I got you to hear that. Like Jesus is enough. The only hope, you look at my life, you see that I have hope. I have hope because of Jesus. And she literally said, you're right. And walked out of my office. The next day I had one of my employees tell me like, what happened with the girl that you were talking to in your office yesterday? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, she's telling everybody she's a Christian now. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
But when I talked to her the next day, she's like, listen, I've watched you live this life out for years. Like, that was the gospel being preached as well. And so part of it is we just try to have these conversations, then we get bummed when they don't work out.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also, if you're showing up late to work and you're not, caring for people well, like it's not going to land well, right? Yeah. People don't want to hear you.
Yeah. Well, that's a good word. One of my, he used to be my youth pastor. He's a church planter now, but that's what we were having a conversation a month or so ago, and that's what he was talking about. He says, we serve the people of the community to earn that conversation.
So it's a Young Life line. The Young Life line is earning the right to be heard. And I didn't love that line at first because I thought, man, I don't have to earn the right. Like, I could just preach the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, but you don't have to earn the right to be heard, but there's value in when you have the ability to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's nothing wrong with the guy who wants to be bold and preach the gospel on a, soapbox on the side of the road. Go for it. But when you can earn the right to be heard, do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, invest that time in a community and care for people well enough and believe the God who's sovereign over all things. Sometimes we're in a rush all the time. Like, I just got to say it. If it lands, great. If not, I'm going to move on to the next city. Rather than you've given that opportunity, like, dive into that community and care for them well.
Yeah. Amen. All right. So we're about out of time here. Is there anything you wanted to end with that we didn't cover that you wanted to say?
No, I mean, I love
Open
these conversations. Yeah, I love these conversations. I would really encourage people to ask themselves the question, man, do I really believe this? Mm-hmm. If Jesus is who he says he is, do I live like it? Do I believe it, right? And people always give me a hard time, like, why do you want people to question their salvation? Why do you want them to question whether or not they believe this? Because I don't want you to be wrong about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're wrong, that sucks, right?
Well, I don't want to live in a lie either. I mean, that's...
Exactly. But you know what I think people are afraid of is that if they ask that question about their heart and they're super introspective, that they'll go, man, what if, I haven't really been living for Jesus. They were afraid that Jesus is up there like, dang, like, sorry, dude. Jesus is like, come, please. Yeah. Like, I want you to die to yourself. I want you to live for me. He doesn't, if you ask those hard questions to yourself, you're never going to get a rejection from Jesus at the end of it. You're actually going to open arms. Finally, You've been living in this life. Finally come and live in my presence. So my encouragement to people is, man, this is either true or it isn't. It's either everything or it's nothing, right? And so I would encourage you to run from pastors that make you okay with your sin, that make you okay with living like the world, that make you okay with being like everybody else. You know what I'm saying? Like, be radical about this, man. Be willing to risk it all because this is either true or it isn't. And so my encouragement to people is live like it's true, right? Live in a way where people look at you and go, man, I don't believe it, but you really believe this. And so part of that is good content. I would encourage you to seek out good content that makes you ask hard questions. People that I really respect and love, John Piper, Jen Wilkin, Matt Chandler, David Platt, Paul Washer, like I could go on and on. R.C. Sproul. There's a lot of solid dudes out there, and girls, everybody. But there's a lot of people who aren't. And so one of the things I always say to people all the time is if you're hearing a lot about how to make your life better, if Jesus is a tool that you can use to make your life better, leave, run. This is not about your life getting better. It's about your life going away and his life coming alive in you. So, man, it's either true or it isn't. So
very good. And I think that's an important question. We'll end with that. That's such an important question because it'll wreck your life in such a way that you can't come out on the other side as you went in. And I don't know of anybody that I know that is a Christian now that when they ask that, I mean, that's the same after asking that question because it does, like you said, it drives you to the point where you have to confront the fact, is what I've always said I believe what I actually believe. And it'll wreck, I don't want to say destroy because it is destroy, but it'll wreck your life in such a way that you come out on the other side. You'll either you never had the faith to begin with and you realize that, or you're so passionate about Jesus that people, I mean, there is such a distinct change in your life that people can't, I mean, it's not ignorable. So
it's not.
Oh, we just lost him. What happened? I don't know what happened. We just lost him, guys. His phone might have died. Anyway, he just went away. So that was basically the end of the conversation. So I guess that works out. It's bummer that he kicked off like that, but his phone must have died or something. But I want to appreciate him being on here. Guys, I would totally encourage you to go find ODG Apparel on Instagram, follow them, check out that podcast. Some really good on that podcast, just to give you kind of an insight to that. There's some really long form conversations where, like you said before, it's just talking about Jesus and the gospel. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. Just these conversations, talking to other people, other pages that maybe you guys didn't know about or other people you didn't know about. That was Dave from ODG Apparel. I'm pretty sure his phone died. But I'm really glad that we were able to get through that conversation. This will be up on Instagram later this week. Hopefully 24 hours from now, this video will go down and I'll get this uploaded to Instagram, or uploaded to YouTube rather, and I'll post a link for it. Next Wednesday, we're going to have Lindsay Davis on here. She used to go to Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, and she does not anymore. She, I think the hashtag I see all the time associated with her is defecting from Bethel, but essentially well, I'll let her tell her story, but I think it's going to be a super interesting conversation next week as well, which is the whole purpose of doing this, bringing you guys good content outside of the memes. So thank you for joining. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys, and if so, join in next Wednesday and turn on those notifications so that you know when we go live to have these conversations. Have a great day.